Welcome to Down in the Data, an audio series where we talk to the data science and analytics staff of the Indiana Department of Correction and learn how they use data to solve problems.
Welcome. My name is Chris Covey, and over the next couple of audio episodes, I'm going to introduce you to the data science and analytics team for the Indiana Department of Correction. This audio series is dedicated to telling the story of how this amazing team uses tools and technology to make the world better. So I met Eric a little while ago when I had the opportunity to develop a presentation for the Corrections Technology Association annual conference. The more I learned about what they were doing, the more intrigued I became.
So let's start with introductions. Eric, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I am Eric Ballinger. I am the Director of Data Science and Analytics for the Indiana Department of Correction. I've worked for the DSA more or less since its inception as such. I've been with IDSE since 2019.
Benjamin, you're up.
I'm Benjamin Covington. I'm an operation analyst for the Data Science and Analytics division, and I've been with the division for coming up on 2 years now.
So, Eric, how did this group of awesome people get together?
Luckily, we've been given a fair amount of latitude. So the Data Science and Analytics division really spawned out of a project in 2016 that helped reduce some staff assaults. And from that, the commissioner decided that we should have more people doing data science. We should be doing something more. We should do something more with the data. I was lucky enough to interview with Sarah Shelley, and that's kind of where it started. Because when I say that I've been here since the beginning of the division, I think, the first or second person actually hired to work in initially was the Division of Legislation and Data Science. That merged other stuff together. As time has passed, the division has moved its focus a little bit. I mean, we are still doing all the data analytics stuff that's federally required by state statute. We've been able to find people who want to do more than just create frequency charts and list tables of things to try to improve the lives of these folks. And every time we have even been a successful project, I think that grants us even more latitude. And it shows that not just looking for people with a criminal justice background or the background correction can net some very positive results.
Eric, can you talk a little bit about the history of data science division?
The research division is in statute. So oddly enough, within DOC, it's research purposes research. We're the only division that is in statute. All the rest of them are at the commissioner or the governor's discretion. But that one, if they want to get rid of research in DOC, it will require the legislature to change that. Now, the discretion is very different, because it mostly talks about, providing, those counts that we're talking, that, how many people are in our custody, how much does it cost to do certain things, what kind of programs are we using, what's the program utilization. So what is specifically within statute, the bulk of that statute is about counts and numbers and frequencies and all that. But there's two lines that are really important, that we are there to provide information to researchers, and we are encouraged to produce our own research on the nature of criminality and criminology. So those two grant us that are really that impetus to do more than just catalog human misery. We are required to produce certain, again, we produce our population bond that goes out. So like, over the course of this month, we had this video admissions and this new releases and all that stuff. But if we can look closer at what program utilization, reduces violence or increases health or reduces recidivism, which is what everyone is talking about, they're gone. Then we should do that. So the research division has been around since sometime in the late 70s, early 80s. I think that's when that statute was originally written. So we have to have some group of people that produces numbers. the notion that it can do more than just trace frequency tables really does stem from work in 2016, where we started realizing that we have all of this information. Why don't we do something with it?
Eric, do you want to describe the different skill sets that you have within the department?
Yeah. Like I said, we don't actually, at this point, we have only one person with a corrections background. So what everyone brings to the table is very different. Other than everyone has at least some background in statistics and analysis to a certain extent, but also very different sections of it. So, some of it's a little broader, and some of it's very narrowly focused on very high level statistics. Our backgrounds are of the group that I've managed to assemble, again, given the latitude that we have. So on the one hand, we have a researcher now. Most of her focus is in qualitative research. So looking at large amounts of just generally considered unorganized data and putting into some kind of structure so that it becomes meaningful in a way that you don't have to read 4,000 pages of stuff to make it make sense. One of our researchers has a PhD in neuroscience. So again, very different statistical background, but also very important. My own background is quantitative psychology, which is I have a fairly broad array of statistical tools, none of them quite as well honed as any of the other folks. Which is useful to say, okay, I think this thing will work. And now I can go talk to this particular analyst and say, hey, great. I think this will work. You tell me if I'm right or not, or if I'm doing that. But on the other hand, the backgrounds also are very diverse. So, again, we have an MBA in it with a background in theater. And, my background is, I was at quantitative psychology, English and philosophy. The MBA's background is in theater. Prior to the MBA, we have a math teacher. One of our researchers started out in LA. And then we have folks with normal criminal justice backgrounds. One criminal justice major and someone came up through the facilities and corrections. So all of this stuff allows us to do more than to go back to this frequency trick, but allows us to go beyond that because everyone thinks slightly differently. And so you think about this in terms of business or in terms of, of course, this is what we should expect to have happen. That's how brains work. When you place someone under certain conditions, that's how they're going to respond. Prison is just a very ramped up environment. But I think the most important skill that I've looked for is someone who is willing to look at the world slightly differently than a straight corrections or criminal justice background. It's not always these people in prison, end of story. It's why are they here? How can we keep them safe while they're here? And how do we make sure that when they leave, they don't come back using whatever tool happens to show up?
So I guess then I'd ask, how do you collect this information? And then what do you do with it?
So to that question, of starting with, how do we collect the data? A lot of that actually comes down to what is available to us. And we don't have to simply passively accept what's available, but there is, a realistic consideration of we're already collecting a lot of data because of ongoing processes, simple tracking purposes. And as Eric's mentioned, more than just cataloging human misery, then the question becomes, what can we do with what we're already collecting? So we're talking about individuals who are in our custody 24 hours a day. We keep track of any incidents, between offenders that constitute a conduct violation. We keep track of grievances. We keep track of, because we provide healthcare while they're with us, we keep track of, their healthcare records. We keep track of, when they leave and come back, the reasons for which they come back, their encounters with parole boards. Well, but there's quite a bit that we're constantly tracking. And then it is a matter of question setting from that. But alongside that, we do end up also asking, what can we collect on reasonably? So there are times when, we can arrange data sharing with other agencies within the state, because these are, of course, individuals who exist as citizens within the state prior to coming to us, and whenever they leave us. So they have engagements with other state agencies, and we can ask of some of those sources, is there a way in which sharing data between us can help us facilitate better questions? So there are times when the questions are born of the data available to us, and there are times when the questions are moored first by some perceived need, and then we ask, is there data that we could bring together to bear upon this? A lot of the question setting then is not an unreasonable amount of it inspired internally by the various backgrounds many of us have as we look at what comes across our desks, or as we engage various simple data requests. It'll spawn other things, but also via ongoing conversation with other divisions in the department. For example, I have a penchant for the medical unit and the data that they work with, and trying to help them address some of their operational needs. So there have been not a few times when, through conversation with them, they don't necessarily fully understand what we do. We don't necessarily fully understand what they do. And it is in the conversation that we realize, oh, here's a touch point where we could try to address a need. A specific example is trying to deal with the limited resources available to manage mental health cases, and knowing at the sites where we have those resources available, what kind of load we might forecast for staff over the coming 6 months. Do we expect to see an increase in individuals classified with a certain category of mental health condition, so that they are prepared to some degree to adapt to that increased load, or to reallocate resources from an area with an expected decreased load? And it can be simple things like that to, of course, the things like the assault model predicting adverse outcomes so that they can be avoided is one of the big goals. And we do often find ourselves asking, what are some adverse outcomes that we could avoid, not only while they're currently in a facility, but after they leave. There have been cooperative efforts with FSSA in the Returning Citizens Task Force to ask, can we predict how likely they are to visit the emergency room within the first 180 days after release? And does that relate to any vulnerability characteristics that we know about before we release them, so that we can help them make that transition, get healthcare support so that they're less likely to enter into a crisis state before they pursue healthcare support? There are all sorts of things that we can ask, and it's just a matter of working with other stakeholders in the department and in other departments to identify what priorities are, and then ask, is that something that we have the data for, can get the data for, have a method statistically to answer, because statistics can answer quite a few questions, not necessarily all, which, I'm sad to say. But it is one of those things where it's an ongoing conversation that continues to frame what it is we do to help facilitate the overall work of the department.
So Eric, you've described the characteristics of what makes up the team, but how many people are on the team currently?
Well, we've got is directly under me. Because we also, so the division itself sort of tends to merge and separate on a weird timeline. Because as you know, we just went through a major shift in our vendor management system. And so part of the team is dedicated almost exclusively to working with that side of things, how to hold their data. A brand new system. No one really understands, even the developers, because it was built by a team of developers. There's no one person that knows, like, here's where this is. Oh, okay, I built this part, and I need to go to this guy and build that part, because they all interact. So it's this weird chain. So on the data science analytics side of things, probably four people. Yeah, there's 4 there. And then I have someone I share with community corrections who also does a bunch of similar things for community corrections, though on a far more limited scale. Because in Indiana, once someone leaves a facility, if they don't go on parole, our information about them becomes or scattered, over disparate. And then there are 3 individuals who handle a lot of the analytics side of things, working right out of the vendor management system. So they're pulling queries, they're fixing data, they're creating reports that are exclusively for internal consumption. So things like things like temp letters. They help produce, where is this guy supposed to be today? Or what's their job today? So all told, that's 8 people. But all doing very different things. And it started really, again, data analytics was, I think, 3 or 4, and then data science was originally just 1. So you've grown quite a bit. So, and one of the things to add on to what Benji was saying about how we come up with these models, and I think he skipped over the obvious thing because it was an obvious thing. Some of it is there are existing tools. So with the suicide model we have, I started with, well, let's suppose that people who are more susceptible to depression are more likely to attempt suicide. I can't have the Delta-Beck depression inventory. However, there is another inventory called the Holmes-Brady life event inventory that is just a list of things that have happened to you over the course of the last year, and they're each given our weight. Well, most of the things on that list we track. So I didn't need to go talk to these people. I can drop them into this inventory and say, okay, so based off of this, you have an elevated chance of depression, which by extension probably elevate your possibility of suicide. So there are existing inventories and existing models that are generally used out in the open population that we may already have the answers to those questions, and we can just plug that in and see how well it applies to first. And I think Benjamin skipped over that part because only kind of involves us. It's just like, oh, here's the thing. I would just use that thing.
So lastly, I kind of want to talk about some of the different models and the different inventories. Can you talk a little bit about just the 5 that you're working on right now or that have been established?
Well, yeah. So we have a handful of models that we're working relatively well. But as I mentioned, we just changed our vendor management system. And as a result, where that data is has all moved. Some of it just straight disappeared. Other parts of it, though, actually will potentially be easier to get to. But regardless of that, we have to rebuild everything. Yeah. Luckily, we're not starting from scratch. Like with the assault model, we kind of know what has an impact. So we just have to go find those things and drop it back in and possibly shift some stuff around. We have a contraband model that helps to guide where to search, not which physical building within a facility. Because while they're supposed to search every building within a certain amount of time, often we don't have staff for that. So by prioritizing and saying, okay, this building is most likely to have contraband, start here and then run through all the ones that have a greater than 50% chance and then get as many done as you can. That suicidal ideation model that we can talk about. It's awful at predicting who will attempt suicide, but excellent at divining people who won't. So what you get is one good for, as Benjamin mentioned, for resource allocation. So we know that there's roughly 15% historically of offenders who will claim to be suicidal as a de facto protected custody. But this model, if the person working with them jumped out, counselor, sorry. So if the counselor has no experience with this person, they can look at this model and say, okay, so you do not appear to have any markers that say you're suicidal. I think you're one of the people who just want out of yourself. And of course, the main thing there is the counselor should override that. If they've met this guy and my model says that they're fine, but the counselor's like, I'm not sure that's true. Just ignore it. Bring it. But that way we can help again allocate resources to people who actually might conceivably. Again, the model's awful for predicting suicide. If it says that you are suicidal, it is right 10% of the time. But I would much rather than caution. If it says, if they claim to be suicidal and the model says they are, let's get them in suicide. What else we got going on? Benjamin, you got a bunch more, I think, in ways.
Sure. So right now, looking at the effects of certain indicators of stress on violent outcomes, we have some indicators that we collect regularly on that have been associated with increased reactivity, and that there are a few ways to deal with reactivity, and they are fight, flight, or freeze, basically. So if you have something that cues you up to a threat feeling, we're mostly concerned with the fight scenario, because you don't really have anywhere to flee to in our custody. And if you freeze, generally, our custody staff can manage the situation pretty well. If you fight, we don't want offenders to get hurt. We don't want staff to get hurt. So, helping contribute to continually improving our models, including the assault model, and extending some of them into, new possible data sources. Looking at the potential to employ, existing research and data we have available to predict negative medical events, like the acquisition of a pre-diabetic or diabetic state. It's not particularly uncommon in any population, really. Looking at, we've put together a model that looks at the likelihood of a certain type of mental health code change with a given period after they arrive with us. So we classify individuals with certain mental health levels, and A indicating that, effectively everything's fine with this individual. They don't need significant mental health support from our staff, but we have individuals who, because of pre-existing mental health condition or because of substance abuse, because of any number of things, might be classified as something other than an A and need varying degrees of support, whether that's regular engagement with group therapy contexts or one-on-one engagement. And it has been important to know, do we expect, based on certain incoming factors that an individual has, how likely are they to, within the first 6 months, go from an A down to something more severe? And that can be because of something that engages our context, in fact. So we can actually ask, are there certain people who are likely to engage prison differently, where it is something that causes a deterioration in their mental health status and we need to provide more support? We actually have some people where the data suggests that prison, being as structured as it is, they might have a bit of an increased mental health status. So those people are of less concern in that particular domain. I mentioned before asking questions about what happens when they are released. So there are a number of medical concerns there, but also we have one individual right now. There's often the question of recidivism. It's what so many people in so many contexts care about. We have one individual who's looking at releasing to food deserts and whether that predicts the likelihood of them coming back to us. In fact, we actually work with a number of researchers. Eric mentioned, providing data to researchers is a big thing, and it's interesting to see how many people are interested in exploring a variety of factors that it would be hard for us to think of all of them. It is impressive how many people are working on that question of what happens after people leave our care. And that's one small part of it that a member of our team was particularly passionate about following up on. I'm trying to think what else has been recently on the docket. There's actually, this is a thing that I'm passionate about. Looking at various methods of considering the same question, because this is a thing that statistical theory brings to bear upon pretty much any real world context that collects data regularly. We can try to predict things in a variety of fashions with more or fewer assumptions about our model when we start out. And it's with varying degrees of success. You see this in the financial sector, the technological sector, in a lot of social research as well. And I do appreciate that there has been a substantial amount of leeway in this division to model the same thing multiple ways to try to actually ask what is most suitable for the data we have available. Let's not just take the first thing we hear about for any of these questions that we've mentioned and say, this is the way it has to be done because this is the way someone on our team happened to know we could do it the first time it was heard about. No, we can continue to explore and ask, really, how can we truly make the most of our data by delving deeply into the statistical tools available to us? From what is, statistics is an ever developing discipline with more and more nuanced methods, more and more nuanced tools being provided to us constantly. How can we take those ever evolving tools and apply them more finely to get at the outcomes that people are interested in?
Thanks for taking the time to listen to this episode. I'd like to thank Eric and Benjamin for taking the time to talk with me. In upcoming episodes, we will discuss the tools that the Indiana Department of Correction uses to develop the models and metrics. We will talk about how the results from the analysis can be used for bad. And we will also discuss the different models that they have developed and are in the process of developing. This recording is brought to you from the BerryDunn Government Consulting Team. If you have any questions, I can be reached at covey@berrydunn.com. This episode was produced by Eric and myself. I'd also like to thank Doug Rowe, Seth Hedstrom, and Chad Snow for making this possible. Until next time.